This is a Trivia Pursuit card, and it says, what sacred peak did adventurers Larry Williams and Bob Cornuke claim they found after sneaking into Saudi Arabia? The answer is Mount Sinai. When you've made Trivia Pursuit, you've arrived. There's nothing better than that. Well, I'm going to be saying some things today that have never been spoken to on the stage. I'm going to reveal some information that I've been hesitant for years and years and years to share. But just having lunch, I was talked into it and had a little arm twisting. But what you're about to hear is pretty interesting, I think, pertaining to Noah's Ark and a couple of frauds and things that were going on there that you might not be aware of. And I got talked into doing the motorcycle story again. Everybody's probably, have you all heard the motorcycle story? Everybody's heard it? No? Okay, I got talked into doing the motorcycle story. I started off not coming from a family that ever went to church. My dad was a bartender. Every other fourth word in the house was a swear word. He was pretty rough on us physically, not ever sexual stuff. In those days, they just smacked the kids to keep them in line. And so he was a pretty hard drinker. And so Saturday nights, he'd get intoxicated. Every Saturday and every Sunday around 10 o'clock when he woke up, he was real ornery. So at 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, I got out of the house, and my brother and I went in the neighborhood riding our bikes or just getting away to the park or something. Because then about 1 o'clock, the football games would start, or baseball, and he'd have something to eat, and he'd be fine by then. But there was 2 hours of just we needed to get out of the house every Sunday morning. So I rode my bike, and I saw this church, and it had all these people filing into it, and there was a sign out front that said, free donuts. So I pulled up, and I walked up, and I started eating the donuts, and they had cocoa, and then they said, church is starting. So they brought me in, I filed in with the crowd and sat in the back of the church. I'd never been in a church before. It was beautiful. Stained glass, flowers, fathers with their starched white shirts with the thin black ties. Remember in those days? And the dads and little daughters with their little, frilly socks and everything. And so that's when women wore the hats in those days. And so I remember it was just great. And then I'm sitting there saying, oh, this is wonderful. It can't get any better than this. And then they passed a plate full of money in front of me. I said, free donuts and free money. I took $5, passed the plate. I think this is great. I mean, what more are they going to do to market? Who wouldn't want to come here on a Sunday morning? So then it came time to go to youth camp. So they said, who's going to go to youth camp? Well, I didn't have any money. The guy at the church says, well, we'll pay, because I had won an attendance award the first year. I didn't miss the first year. I just went by myself. So I won this attendance award, so they sent me to Green Oaks Ranch in San Diego. And they have this, you know what it is? It's all week long. You know what they do? They feed you donuts. These Christians and donuts. And then come Friday, you're all hyped up on donuts, and they have you come to Jesus. So I accepted Jesus, full of sugar and full of the Holy Spirit. And so then when I left, when I graduated from college, I said, what am I going to do for a career? And I said to myself, I'm already addicted to donuts. I'm going to be a policeman. So I got in the police department. I became patrolman. I was a detective, a motorcycle guy. Best job is a motorcycle because they have the best looking uniforms. And you go to the academy and you wear a Levi's and a t-shirt and tennis shoes, but then you graduate and they give you a brand new uniform. High black shiny boots, midnight blue uniform with a yellow stripe going down, tight fitting blue pants, helmet with a white with a silver eagle in the front. Then you bring out this brand new motorcycle, just bathed in chrome, lights all around. I got in it and I started up and I drove down Harbor Boulevard. Got halfway down Harbor Boulevard and I said to myself, I wonder what I look like. And there was a Kmart with the long row windows. So I pulled alongside and I remember looking at myself in the reflection and I remember saying to myself, you're the man. Just that time, a yellow Volkswagen backed up. I didn't see because I was looking at myself. I hit her and I flew over. A little young girl, I hit her, went over onto my tight blue pants. My supervisors came, what happened? I said, I was looking at myself, and they said, we can't have a guy who's ADD driving around on a motorcycle. So they assigned me to homicide investigation a few months later. And, what harm could I do to somebody that's already dead on the ground with a white chalk outline around them? And I learned I had a skill. I learned that I had a skill, and that's finding evidence. Other officers would just walk by, and I'd say, look at that bullet hole, look at that striation mark, look at that piece of cloth. What is that? That screen was ripped there. Look at that blood drop. And they would go, what blood drop? And I'd say, right, I realized I just find things. I have a real gift for finding lost things. And so then I'd go to court and I'd present my case and I'd say, look at the evidence I have, and here's where the bad guy's really wrong. And then the attorneys on the other side were real slick and they made a lot of money and they confused the jury. And I found that evidence isn't proof, it's the proper interpretation of evidence that is the proof. See, we don't do that today. We can get really muddled up, right? Everybody has a different opinion. Democrats, Republicans, right? Different denominations. Are you married out there? Do you have a different opinion? My wife's here. Where's Terry? Where's Terry? Can you please stand up? Please stand up, Terry. Just please stand. There's my wife over there. Yes, okay. There he is. Beautiful. And we got in a little bit of an argument here, some time back, and she thought she was right, and I thought I was right, and, it kind of, she really dug her heels in. The problem is, I was right. What do you do when you're right and your wife is wrong? You don't want to go in an argument. So in the wisdom of Solomon, I said, if you admit I'm right, I'll admit I'm wrong. She says, cool, you go first. I said, okay, I'm wrong. She says, you're right. Well, sometime later, when I was a policeman there, I worked as a crime scene investigator. I was on the SWAT team. And then working as a detective one night, I got a call that someone had lit their truck on fire in their front yard. And it was a man who got arrested for drunk driving the night before. He wanted to commit suicide and kill a police officer. So he poured gasoline all over his brand new pickup truck, parked it in his very front yard, lit it on fire. We went to check it out, and I was right around the corner, saw the black smoke, said I'd 910, which means I'll check it out, pulled up, got out, dressed in my, sports jacket, 9mm under here. He didn't probably know I was a policeman because he would have shot right away, but I walked up to the front, and there was the car on fire. There's a street, and it's an old 1950s, subdivision where it's very close to the street, maybe 35 feet from the street to the door, and I walked up, and I was looking at the thing, and he had a rifle pointed right at me. And the rifle was right at my forehead. And he said, are you a policeman? I'm going to kill a policeman. I said, no. It was a good answer, thank you. It was the right answer. I backed up, I started walking back to the car, and all of a sudden I felt stinging in the back of my legs. He had shot the asphalt and it sprayed up against my legs, and a tree branch came down and hit me because the bullet severed the tree branch. I curled in behind the police unit, got out the radio, and I called in, and I said I'm being shot at, and they sent all the people, and then all of a sudden they sectioned off at the ends of the street, CNN, CBS, ABC, they got all the news cameras there because it went on for 3 hours. He shot 700 rounds of ammunition while I was curled in behind the car from 30 feet away. I could see the tiles bursting off the roof. I could see the stucco, and I could see, the glass breaking, and I could see all that just because I'm behind the unit. He's shooting at me this way, and so I'm down there like this, and I'm radioing in. And after about 3 hours, I realized that I had drunk about 5 cups of water that day. I was out there all exposed to all the TV cameras, and I got to go pee. Bad situation. National TV. The guy came out, kicked the door, went up over the trunk, shotgun went off. The man was laying in the bushes. In fact, Sig Swanstrom, you're all friends with, how many know Sig Swanstrom? He was the one that was my roommate in college and kind of steered me, in the right direction many times. But Sig was there, went up and started witnessing to the guy, saying, you've only got about 2 minutes before you're going to die. He witnessed Christ to him. But I ran in the house, and all the news people said, the brave officer is going to the house to check for hostages. I came out about 4 minutes later and said, Code 4, everything is fine. I left the police department after that. I don't know what would happen. I don't know if I was scared. I don't know if it was just seeing a man dying. I don't know what it was, but I just, for some reason, I came out here to visit my brother Paul, and right up, not close to us here, I went up doing some fly fishing and catching some trout and just enjoying the mountains of Colorado, and I said, you know, this is where I want to be. So I surprised everybody, packed up, moved out here, and then started a job with my brother, and then met a man named Jim Irwin, the 8th man to walk on the moon. First one to drive. How many remember watching the men walk on the moon? Oh, okay, stand up if you saw the people walk on the moon live on TV. The rest of you stay seated. Seriously. Stay standing. Those of you saw the astronauts walk on the moon, stay standing. Those of you sitting down, look at these people. This is what you're going to look like when you're really old. Makes you want to floss and eat vegetables, doesn't it? Pretty scary. Whew. Jermo said that he walked through the lunar dust, he lifted up the visor, and he said he looked at the earth and he saw it was green and blue and white and brown. He says, it was living, breathing instrument. He said in the zone of space, which is really death, he said everything in space wants to kill you. It's a death zone. Space, nothing lives in space. He said, but here's the earth, warm and sparkling and life and jungles and rivers. And he said, I knew at that moment that it's not a cosmic accident, that it was breathed into existence by a master craftsman. Well, Jim went and took me for Noah's Ark after that. He says, hey, Bob, you want to go look for Noah's Ark? We became good friends. You know, when you tell someone you're going to look for Noah's Ark, they think you wrap tinfoil around your head and you look for the mothership, you know. But I'm out there meeting with Jim, and he's saying, look, and we went and we had a great time. We saw some great things. The Noah's Ark expeditions, this is where I need to really shift gears right here. Because I'm going to be saying some things right now that I didn't expect to be saying. But there's a man in the audience that came up to my son and said something about Roskovitsky seeing the Ark on an expedition by the Russians. Right? Is that young man here? Have you all heard of it? There's the Russian expedition that they said in World War I, that they flew around the mountain and this Russian pilot saw it, and then the Tsar's army went up there and photographed and did all that, okay? It's been the subject of most of the Ark books will have that as the centerpiece of saying that the Ark of Noah is on Mount Ararat in Turkey. That's the center thing. Two things, really. Ferdinand de Vara, who said he found wood in the 1950s, and Roskovitsky, the Russian, the pilot that said he saw it, are the two most widely spread pieces of information about the Ark of Noah being on Mount Ararat in Turkey. I've been up that mountain several times. I was the first one to fly a helicopter around it on an expedition, planes around it. I've been on horses, on foot. I've been all over that thing in Jeep, and there's no Noah's Ark that I could find. Now, the Roskovitsky thing, in fact, if you go get any book on Noah's Ark, flip through it, there'll be a whole section on this guy, all right? And I've been hesitating to tell this to audiences for years, except for today. I don't know why today. I just really felt, I like Bob a lot and Prophecy and the News folks, and I figured, well, it's pretty cool to do it. I have a letter here dated, and I got this from the files of Jim Irwin, all right? His wife Mary Irwin provided it for me as well. This letter is to David Foschholz, June 21st, 1989. He's writing about this Roskovitsky pilot, this Russian pilot. He said he's a pastor, and his name is Lloyd Gurley, G-U-R-L-E-Y. Okay, Floyd M. Gurley, all right? He writes this letter. He says, now I want to explain about the Whopper. I had a tenant sent me by government as a refugee along with her boy. I'm reading it verbatim. Her name was Gabriella Shella, and the boy was named Georgie. We called her Mom. One day, she told me the story that the ark still existed and it was thawing out from a glacier on Mount Ararat. Well, I wrote up the story and published it in the March issue of New Eden and used the pseudonym of Vladimir Roskovitsky, which I devised from a Russian I knew named Vladimir Rosenheim. This was in the March 1939 issue. The story went wild worldwide, and I got a letter from as far away as India, Australia, and New Zealand. It has been retold in at least a dozen books and still going today. I hang my head in shame that I have caused so many to spend so much money chasing a will-o'-the-wisp. It must have cost folks $250,000 all told. Sorry. It's all a hoax. But yet it's in book after book after book. But how are we, the consuming public, to know and have a filter on what is truth and not truth? This is the hard thing. When we're told by credible people and credible ministries that there is this, we get our hopes up that the ark still exists. And you know what? It doesn't matter if we find an old boat on the side of a mountain. What matters is we find the real ark in Jesus Christ that's right in front of us. Yeah. If that door is open on that ark, you go in. If you're off that ark, you perish. You're either on the ark or you're off the ark. There's no spiritual Switzerland. We've got to make a choice. But we focus in on the sensational. Now here I'm up there, Mr. Indiana Jones I'm introduced as all over the world, and I tell you, I don't care if we find Noah's Ark or not. What I care is that the search is so intriguing to people that they'll come to conferences, they'll come to churches, and I can tell them about the real important ark in Jesus Christ. But I think you ought to know the search because it is fascinating. It's still fascinating to me. And I don't think there's been anyone in the history of the planet that has spent more time traveling and searching for Noah's Ark than I have. I've never been challenged on that. I've done 13 mountains. I've traveled thousands and thousands of miles by jeep and foot all over Iran, all over Turkey, been 5 times to Iran. I've put in the time. I've been arrested twice in Iran. In fact, I've been arrested 5 times altogether in the Middle East searching for lost locations in the Bible, which my wife says is great because it makes for great chapters in the books. She has the life insurance agent on speed dial. Every time I go on a trip, she joins the singles group. That's really discouraging. She thinks he's not going to come back. I've got to have somebody lined up who's going to mow the lawn. The next biggest piece of evidence about Noah's Ark. We've all heard about Ferdinand Navarro, right? Ferdinand Navarro, 1950s, we've seen the grainy black and white films flickering in front of a TV set, and it all says, oh, this man went over there with his son and threw a rope down on the glacier and pulled up beams of wood, and we've all gone, Noah's Ark has been found. Here's a letter from Ferdinand Navarro, April 25th, 1985, Mr. James B. Irwin, the High Flight Foundation. During my 3rd expedition in 1995, I discovered at an altitude of 4,250 meters remains of a construction. This must be the Ark of Noah. Therefore, the Holy Bible spoke the truth. I'm sorry, it was 1955. Did I say 1955? Okay, 1955. I said 1990. Okay, 1955, he found this thing. He sends the wood over to Jim. Jim has it tested. The test results are from Center for Applied Isotope Studies. The piece of wood is from 435 AD, after Christ. Okay, a little dating, a little problem. Now, if you have a problem with the dating of that, then you might see the surprise that what they said is that the oil or bituminous material was spread over it, dated to about 2 years old. Okay, so we have wood. And I went over there and I met with one of the men that went up the mountain with Ferdinand Navarro. And he was my guide on my second to last trip. And he told me that he was a young boy and he carried all the equipment up there, the camera equipment. So it was quite heavy. He carried it up, but he said what was really hard to carry was the pieces of wood that his brothers and cousins had to haul up there and drop in the glacier so they can dig it out. That's what he told me. Now, if you want me to keep going, I have more and more. Let's see. We have the picture of the latest Chinese thing, guys. I just have one picture to show. Usually I show videos, but I felt like just talking today because I had a lot to share. Is it up? Okay. A couple years ago, I think it was, a year or two ago, it came out in the news that the Chinese had found the Ark of Noah. All right? They showed great pictures. Look at the beams. This has to be from Noah's Ark. WorldNet Daily called me and Randall Price, and I gave him an interview, and I said, well, you might want to just check out on the beams up above there. It's all full of cobwebs. And you don't have cobwebs at 13, 14, 15,000 feet. These pictures we found out later were taken around the Black Sea area in some kind of a stable. The other photos show, and I super enlarged them, a rock wall with 3 rocks we can see inside the ark. And of course, you didn't have rock walls inside Noah's Ark, I would assume. Okay? We have many other people have said they found Noah's Ark. Ron Wyatt has said he's found Noah's Ark. I met another young boy over there around the Drupanar site, and I asked him about Mr. Wyatt, who had been there, who he knew, and his family, and he said that there were bits of wood dipped in tar that were put a board drill down, put the chips of wood, and then next year came back when the grass had grown over, and they drilled down on the same spot, and the wood chips came up. And so there was a declaration there that Noah's Ark was found, according to this young shepherd boy. Now, why is it that we have so many frauds around Noah's Ark? Because it is the big one. It is the thing that will change everything. It is the tipping point of our faith. Because if we can prove that there's Noah's Ark, which is considered the Achilles heel of the Bible, because people say, hey, that could never happen, then it becomes more malleable for us to accept other things in Scripture. We can all be in the safe boat of Jesus, but we don't want to be in the difficult boat with Noah. So Noah has become this thing where people say, out of fervency for faith, maybe that drives them, maybe it's for fame, maybe it's for money. But Noah's Ark has not been found. Now, I found some things over in Iran that I'm not putting out as being from Noah's Ark at all. I went over with Josh McDowell and a few other people, and we found some interesting things. And we believe that that could be the area. Because the Bible says in Genesis 11, 1 and 2, it says the descendants of Noah, really says like with 4 generations around the time of Nimrod, that these people, which were the descendants of Noah, journeyed from the east and they settled in Shinar. Okay, can we have somebody read that in the New King James or the King James? Does anybody have that here? Anybody have the NIV Bible? Anybody have an NIV? Anybody have a Bible? What conference is this? I mean, is this Pilates or something? What are we doing here? Okay, what is it? Do you have the NIV or what do you have? Huh? Okay, and the NIV, you have them all. Okay, you're carrying this all on your back alone. Okay, please stand up. The NIV. Genesis 11, 1 and 2. It's in the front of the Bible. I'm sorry.
How about this? And the whole earth was of one language and one speech, and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt.
Okay, they journeyed from the east, right? Okay, who has the NIV? Okay.
Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar.
Okay, thank you. Your version said they came from the east. Your version says they went eastward. The Bible is contradicting itself? Or is man's interpretations contradicting themselves? See, people say the Bible contradicts itself. It never contradicts itself. Now, their lifestyle may contradict what the Bible says. Okay, we have one going eastward and one going from the east. What is the correct rendering? We need to go back and find out what it means, what the authors meant that it said. The reformers used this phrase called ad fontes. It's Latin, which means only from, not towards or in. Okay? It's from the east, which would place it into the northern mountains of Iran, but not further than Afghanistan, because that's out of the more stretched boundaries of Urartu and Armenia. Turkey is northwest. How did Turkey get to be anointed as Mount Ararat in Turkey? About 800 years ago, the Armenians said, hey, there's a big mountain. We just had the Bible translated. That's got to be Mount Ararat. They put Mount Ararat on it, and that has stuck. And it was really galvanized into our culture and Europeans' culture when Marco Polo went through there. Remember Marco Polo, the guy that invented the pool game? He goes through there, and he gets this, oh, I'm told by the locals that that's Mount Ararat. And when Marco Polo wrote it, it went all over Europe, and everybody from that point on said, that's Mount Ararat. The Bible says in Genesis 8:4, it says, in the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, plural. A mountainous region. Not a cone mountain, but a large, vast kingdom of mountains. Mount Ararat in Turkey is one cone mountain that comes out of the Anatolian plain. Now, when I say go back to what the reformers had to say, I have some. We have a car wonk in here, right, Mr. Best? To you? Oh, yeah. Okay. And what's your daughter's name next to you? What's her name? Your daughter? That's your sister. Okay. We won't go. You're a hard crowd. Okay. What's your name? You're not allowed to answer what I'm about to ask, either of you, because you're car wonks, all right? And I'm not going to let you answer this. I'm going to let everybody else answer this, all right? Anybody heard of the song The Beach Boys, Little Deuce Coupe? I got a little deuce coupe. You don't know. My wife gets embarrassed at this point, and she's putting her head down. Okay, a little deuce coupe says, because it says here, because if it had a set of wings, man, I know she could fly. She's my little deuce coupe. You don't know what I got, just a little loose coupe with a flathead mill. She'll walk a thunderbird like she's standing still. She's ported and relieved and she's stroked and bored. She'll do 140 with the top end floor. Let me tell you, Deuce Coupe couldn't do 140 with it being towed by a DC-10. Okay? She's got a competition clutch with a 4 on the floor. She purrs like a kitten to the lake price floor, and that ain't enough to make you flip your lid. There's one more thing. I got the pink slip daddy. What does that mean? Okay, the pink slip, we got it. Okay? What is ported and relieved and stroked and bored? All right, okay. What is a flathead mill? What is a deuce coupe? This is one smart crowd, all right? I'm sorry. I usually get blank stares. I'm kind of, okay, you just ruined my whole illustration. Thank you very much. Just sit there, look like an idiot next time, make me look good. We'll be all together, okay? Thank you. Good night. What does a Bible archaeologist have to do? Trivial Pursuit. Okay, so this means in the 1960s, Brian Wilson was a songwriter, and he wrote for the Beach Boys, and he wrote this song, and he knew what every word meant. And people would know what he meant. And a 32-4, a deuce coupe is a 32-4. The 2 at the end of a 3 means it's a 32-4 because in World War II we made what? 10 cars. We made all ammunition and tanks and guns. We hardly made any cars at all. When these war guys came back after World War II, they said, we want a car. So they got out of these junkyards, these old 32 Fords, which were indestructible, and they made them into really cool hot rods. If you saw the movie American Graffiti, that cool yellow, that's a 32 Ford. That's really cool. Now, if we took, let's say we take this song and we bury it in the ground, and we take this 8-track tape and we put, does anybody know what an 8-track tape is anymore? That's when it came out. It was 4-track tapes. I had a 4-track tape. Anybody has those? But an 8, you remember? 8-track tape. That was a cool thing to have in your car then, wasn't it? Music on the go is great. So if they bury this thing and they come back 1,000 years from now and the Lord tarries and they dig this up and they take this tape and they put it in, they say, what are we going to do with this? Let's go to the museum and get an old 8-track tape. They put it, now we got to get electricity. Anybody know how we can get electricity? We'll figure it out. They get electricity. They play this thing and they get a bunch of scholars in a room, 1,000 scholars. We're going to tell you about what it was like in 1964. So let's see what they said in this ancient song. It says, oh, I got a little deuce coupe. And what's a deuce coupe? Well, it's probably a two-seater. Oh, it purrs like a kitten. The lake pipes roar. Don't know what that is. Pink slip, daddy. Oh, they wear pink dresses riding around in two-seat cars. And they'll get a committee and everybody will seal off on it and that becomes history. That's what's happened to us. People are rewriting the Bible. People are not going to the source. People are saying, I'm going to rewrite the Bible. How do they do this? Well, scholars today in our university systems want 3 things. They want to be promoted, they want prestige, and they want to be published. If they ever say, I believe in Noah's Ark, they will not be published. They will have no prestige, and they will not be promoted. So they live under the radar. And these scholars are, by virtue of what they've created for themselves, unable to say that there was a God that lives outside of nature. So what they do, the critics will say, and about 80% of your students, your little Joys and little Janies, are going to go away to university, and statistically, and I've heard everything from 70 to 80% will fall away from their faith and not come back. Oh, they'll raise their Bible and say John 3:16 the first day, and they'll get crushed. And they want to get along. They want to fill in. They want to please their professors, so they're going to go along, and pretty soon they're going to get sucked into the fan of criticism about the Bible. Let me just quote you some things. Here's what the strategy, and anytime you see a scholar on television who's against the Bible, this is a strategy. And it becomes really funny when you start to see it actually happening. Dr. Sirio Trestivantia, a Canadian biologist who has written a book about the plagues, said the locust could also be explained by the volcanic fallout from the ash. Immanuel Velikovsky, famous book. The plagues of darkness in Exodus were caused by the earth passing through the tail of a comet. Benny Shannon, professor at Hebrew University, Moses was high on drugs when he saw the burning bush and heard God speak the 10 Commandments. Professor Shannon says he knows this because he himself has dabbled with such drugs. No kidding. Colin J. Humphreys, Cambridge University. Cambridge, can we say that with an accent? I'm from Cambridge. The burning bush of Moses was caused by a volcanic vent under a bush, and the Red Sea did not part, but rather was the result of a strong offshore wind. Didn't it say it parted? And there was a right side and a left side, and they went through on dry ground? I mean, let's get this right, guys. Okay, then we've got, let's see, I've got a couple more in here that I want to read to you. Let's see. Then we got the guys from NASA, National Air and Space Museum, have discovered a large former lake in the highlands that would cover an area the size of Texas and New Mexico combined, and when overflowed to carve out one of the planet's largest valleys. The findings appear in the June issue of the Journal of Science. Imagine more than 5 times the volume of the Great Lakes being released in a single flood. These are the same guys that say that on Mars there's not a drop of water that's ever been found, and they say there was a huge flood up there. The same guys look at the earth that's covered in water, say there never was a flood here. Heard the one about in the New York Times. The New York Times. Here I've got it. New York Times. Sea of Galilee might have been frozen, professor says. He talks about the Sea of Galilee, and he says the reason that Jesus could walk across the water is that the water froze because it was real salty. It sunk a little bit below the surface of the water, and then when they walked across, he says the water above the springs does not convect when it is cold. If air temperature dipped below freezing, as sometimes happened, then surface ice could have formed thick enough to support human weight and inspire the biblical story. From a distance, the scientists suggested a person on the ice might appear to be walking on water. Wasn't there a storm out there at the time? Am I missing something here? This is New York Times. Now, how many people in the New York Times do an article? Jesus died and raised from the dead. You're never going to see that. Because the whole purpose is to gut God of the divine. Because you can quantify science and you can't quantify faith, religion, God. The Bible says, beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit according to the traditions of man, according to the basic principles of this world, and not according to Christ. The Bible is saying, beware because they will cheat you. The Bible says, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, thank you for hiding the truth from those who think themselves so wise and clever, and for revealing it to the childlike. Yes, God is asking you to be childlike in your faith, not childish in your faith, not running around, eating boogers, running on the wall, being like a little kid. No, he's saying, be childlike in your faith. What does that mean? When your father is standing below the bunk bed and he goes, son, jump into my arms, you don't sit there and go, are you really going to catch me? I mean, are you capable of doing this? No. He wants you to jump into his arms. And that means he wants you to accept the Bible from beginning to end and put away the pruning shears and not dismantle the Bible so it justifies your lifestyle. The Bible is God's revelation of himself to man. God is the author, salvation is the end, and truth without any mixture of error is the content. The Bible is and shall remain to the end of the world the supreme standard by which we should live. Now, there's a lot of times that we're tricked by a lot of people. We're talking, let's just see about agenda here, okay? I'm going to read you a couple of stories about agendas. Anybody know about a guy named Remus Starr? Ever hear about a guy named Remus Starr? Okay. I'm going to read you this. Remus Starr was he had his picture, and on the back of it, the family had this photo of this guy, and a noose was around his neck, and behind the picture it says, horse thief sent to Montana Territorial Prison, 1885, escaped 1887, robbed the Montana Flyer 6 times, caught by Pinkerton detectives, convicted and hanged in 1889. So this family had this photo, and they wanted to talk about this guy and their path. They didn't want it to be this scurrilous person, to kind of make it bad for the family. So they photoshopped and they took out the news. They put him there, and then this is what they wrote up in the family journal. Remus Starr was a famous cowboy in the Montana Territory. His business empire grew to include the acquisition of valuable equestrian assets. He had intimate dealings with the Montana Railroad. Beginning in 1885, he devoted several years of his life to service at a government facility, finally taking leave to resume his dealings with the railroad. In 1887, he was a key player in a vital investigation run by the Pinkerton Detective Agency. In 1889, Remus passed away during an important civic function held in his honor. When the platform upon which he was standing collapsed. Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy, which is what? The love of wisdom. I am smarter than you. No, God is smarter than us all. We need to cull from the wisdom of God and not the flawed interpretations of man. Okay, did you hear about this, the prank in the high school up in Iowa? You know what they did up in Iowa? They took those 3 goats up there. A lot of you probably heard this. They took 3 goats. And they took them into high school, and these high school students, and I was a real prankster. I love this one. I wish I would have thought of this. They took 3 goats, and they painted on the 3 goats. They put on the first goat, number 1. They painted on the second goat, number 2. They painted on the third goat, number 4. They turned them loose in the high school. They got goat number 2, 3, and 4 within about 2 minutes. It took the rest of the day for the police to try and find the missing goat. Number 3. Isn't that what scholars are doing to us today? When you take off and eliminate the Bible, just take it from a historical and a literacy element as it affected our country and how our country was formed. Isn't that what they're doing? Aren't they tricking us? Aren't they trying to confuse us? And that's what God says. Beware lest anyone cheat you. I've also been involved with searching for such things as Mount Sinai. A lot of you have heard about the Mount Sinai story. I personally think that if, and everything, I was having lunch before this with some great guys, and we were talking about this, and we have to assign things on degrees of probability, because in archaeology, things are up for interpretation, and we're dealing with degrees of probability in archaeology. The only true ways we can find empirical evidence is through physics and through pure logic. So in archaeology, when you see, they're like little pieces of glass that you put it on the floor and you're trying to make a picture. Sometimes we have a few pieces. And sometimes because we have a few pieces, we think we can make a whole picture, and we can't. You see, we're left with saying, this is what we know, this is what we think we know, this is what we don't know. Now, as far as Mount Sinai goes, I think it's pretty strong that Mount Sinai is in Arabia. Because the Bible says in Galatians 4:25, now Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. And I think you heard Dr. Moeller was talking about this and all the what he's talking about and his position on that. I believe that that's very, very strong that the ark or that Mount Sinai is where is in Arabia. As far as my search for the shipwreck of Paul, which we just talked about, I think that's the strongest thing we have. But people are the least interested in it. And it's very hard for me to get my arms around that, because we have 4 anchors found at 120 or at 90 feet before a bay with the beach where 2 seas meet. The Greek term is topon to thalason. That's where 2 seas come together. And you go to Malta today and you do all of the coordination over there, and you see this is the only place it could be. The only place. I was recently, a year ago, I took a cruise ship over there. I took a bunch of people. And at the side where we got off the cruise ship, there was people holding up big signs that said, Bob Cornuke is wrong, step messing with our traditions. Of course, my family, had seen that before, and my wife had seen that before. But they said, stop messing with our traditions. Well, you see, when about the year 1200, when the Normans conquered Malta and they wanted to bring the boys back to Christianity out of being the Muslims, and they said, here, we're going to build a church here on St. Paul's Bay. It's since become a very popular tourist site. There's a $1 billion tourist industry go there. They have St. Paul's McDonald's and St. Paul's McBoutiques and St. Paul's shopping centers. And I say it's not even there. It's on the other side of the mountain because the Bible, or the island, because the Bible says that they came up from the Sirtis Sands, which is Libya, and then they heard the waves crashing. They took soundings to be 120 feet, then 90 feet. Then they saw a bay with the beach where 2 seas meet and come over a reef that has to be about 30 to 35 feet below the water because the ship held fast and hit there. All these things. Then we went over and found the 4 anchors that were first century Alexandrian grain anchors. I went over there with Chuck Missler and a lot of you. How many were on that trip with me? Anybody in here besides Chuck? There's Chuck. He went with me, and we have some others. Ron and Tisha Hicks. Ron went with me looking for Noah's Ark as well. I have probably about 15 people who have been on one trip or another, I guess. We've gone. But they had these big signs. Now, I met that day with Douglas Gresham, who's a good friend of mine. Douglas Gresham has a very famous father named C.S. Lewis. And great guy, and he owns all the Narnia stuff. And so I just saw him a few weeks ago. Had lunch with him and Mary, his lovely wife. But he said, Bob, he says, we read all the newspapers about these protesters when you got off the cruise ship with all their signs saying Bob Cornuke is wrong. And he said, if you were wrong, there wouldn't be any protesters. He said, the fact that you're right has brought out the protesters because you're going against tradition. Now, the Bible talks about tradition 14 times. All of them are in a very negative, derogatory light, except for 3 verses. 1 Corinthians 11:2, now I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things and keep the traditions just as I have delivered them to you. You see what that qualifier is? Just as I have delivered them to you. Don't go anywhere off the mark. 1 Thessalonians 2:15, therefore, brethren, stand fast and hold the traditions which you were taught, whether by word or epistle, just as they were taught from Jesus and the apostles. 2 Thessalonians 3:6, But we command you, brethren, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, that you withdraw from every brother who walks disorderly and not according to the tradition which he received from us. In other words, all this, every time the Bible talks, it talks negatively about traditions. Jesus says in Mark 7:13, he says, your traditions will nullify the word of God. But yet we hold on traditions so dearly because traditions get started like this way in your church. Let's say your church. We just keep the Catholic Church out of it now. I know some of you are kind of bristling right now, but let me just tell you what it says right now. Let's say in your own church. Traditions start this way. It becomes a really cool idea that somebody comes up with. And then somebody has a really cool idea that it becomes beneficial to the church. Then someone has a better idea that we can make this thing profitable. Then someone says, let's make it now necessary that it's profitable. Then we make it church law. And then we say if anybody goes against that law, we're going to punish them. This happens with tradition. How do we find out the truth? There's two ways to find out the truth. One is called, looking at your watch, make sure you don't go over. Okay, I have 7 minutes, right? Is that right? I want to get a couple of questions, so let me go really quick on this. First one is premise plus proof. That's what all the scholars use today. You come up with your hypothesis, you come up with your premise, and you put all your source material around it. In other words, you want to say that cabbage is good for you, you get all the doctors to say it good. You want to say cabbage is bad for you, you get all the doctors to say it's horrible for you. That's premise plus proof. That's a flawed way to find truth. The cops use the right way. The police, the cops. They use the right way. The cops say, what is the problem and what are the possibilities? Galatians 4:25 says, Mount Sinai is Hagar in Arabia. We need to say, okay, it's saying Arabia. That's a problem. Now, what are the possibilities? Let's go look for the correct location. You see, by the sheer methodology of trying to find truth in the university system, and then what you can do is go under peer review. Are you peer reviewed? In other words, I want to stay in the safe harbor of mutual consent. See, people aren't looking for information to help them make a decision. They're looking for confirmation from others to justify an opinion that they already have. That's the problem. We need to follow the Bible as a roadmap and as a compass. And take what men say only as inspiration to put ourselves, as Chuck Missler says, like the Bereans, every day in the Word of God, testing it yourself. If you're relying on other people to get you into heaven, it's not going to happen. You're relying on a gift to God by money, it's not going to happen. You rely on the Pope, it's not going to happen. Rely on a building, not going to happen. If we find the cross of Jesus, is that going to get us into heaven? No. Not the place of the passion, but what happened on the place of the passion. It's not by the wood. We shouldn't worship those tangible objects. We should respect them for the historical reverence that they deserve. But certainly, if we find Noah's Ark, we should probably take lighter fluid and burn it to the ground, because it'll become a cult object. People will look to the wood to give power to them. And the power is from Christ and Christ alone. Not from any wood, not from any preacher, not from any object that comes from the Bible, but from Jesus Himself.
The preceding program has been sponsored by the financial gifts and generosity of our partners and God TV angels in this area.